Welcome back to another episode of the Daily Flip podcast. I'm your host, Alex, and today we're going to be flipping through a story about Greenland and J.D. Vance and the implications of his visit. This story comes from NPR, and of course we will end today with our Daily Delight, a story meant to leave you feeling positive, ready to take on the day. Now, that's enough rambling for me. Let's get into our daily debate. So, do you think Greenland will be independent by the time Donald Trump's presidency is over? Do you think it'll be part of the U.S.? Where do you think it's going? Honestly, at this point, the staying power of being a part of Denmark is probably not going anywhere, though local representatives in Greenland, as we found out when this story first broke, did want to get some form of independence. They've wanted it for quite some time. So where do you see this one headed? I'm curious, before we jump into the story, not that this will provide you with any new facts that would make you think otherwise, but it is always interesting how these stories play out. So, with that, let's jump into the article from NPR. The headline reads, Trump won't rule out military force to take Greenland. Now, the reason that Greenland is important, if you haven't learned by now, national security reasons. It's not just the space base that we have there, the Space Force base that we have there. It is also the fact that the Arctic will be a future battleground, a future sea, given the track we are on with global warming. And though I would love to say it's not going to stop, as much as I would love to say it's going to stop, it's not going to stop. It's going to continue on because there are going to be nations across the world that, as they become more developed, are going to not be able to afford these green technologies. They're going to go for the cheaper ones. They're going to be able to speculate themselves. They're still going to burn coal. And it's a hard trend to reverse even if the top nations of the world try to. So we're going to have a warmer world. This is the reality that we should live under, or at least the presumption we should live under when making plans for the future, because it doesn't seem logical to be saying that it will actually stop. As much as you would aspirationally want it to stop and you would want the world to not be warmer and be able to sustain life, it's not necessarily the world we're living in. So the Arctic will be a huge area of contention when it comes to what areas people control. Right now, Canada has some of the largest borders of the Arctic, Russia as well. And then Denmark has a pretty sizable one because of the size of Greenland. And don't forget, also, when this area opens up, as I mentioned before, it will be a major thoroughfare for trade. No longer will China have to worry about going, if they have a good relationship with China, with Russia, even though there will be some hemming in by Korea and Japan, they won't necessarily have to worry about going south with their trade. They could go north to the Arctic region. So you can see how this is geopolitically important. Russia, if they open up a whole bunch of harbors across that entire path, they can get lots of money and revenue coming from ships stopping at their ports in order to refuel. And guess what? Russia has an abundance of natural gas, oil. So you can see how this is going to play out, or at least a hypothetical situation where it plays out like this. So that is why people have talked about getting a larger presence rather than just Alaska there, at least getting maybe Greenland, considering it is an area that's mostly uninhabited, hasn't gotten a lot of infrastructure and payments from the Denmark government, which they have tried to address recently, especially because of Trump's moves. But the point being that it will be important going into the future. And the article starts off telling us about it. Quote, Greenland is a territory of Denmark, which is a NATO ally of the United States. Trump wants to annex the territory, claiming it's needed for national security purposes. In Saturday interviews, Trump allowed that, quote, I think there's a good possibility that we could do it without military force. This is world peace. This is international security, he said, but added, I don't take anything off the table. End quote. Now, that's a pretty bold statement. That's what NPR really wants to focus on here. And I want to use this article more as a staging ground to actually examine what is going to happen, what could happen, why this is not just important to the Trump idea of national security, but also to why it's a strong move for his posturing and some of his other goals. So obviously the natural resources that are there, that is very appealing to the Trump view of America, which is we need to be an industrialized power, we need to be self-sufficient, we need to be able to produce some of these more advanced technologies that require certain minerals. The more access we have to them, we're already a pretty mineral-rich land, but the more access we have to it up north, the more deposits, the more also, they will cause a speculation boom, a prospecting boom of companies wanting to go there. These are all things that fall within the U.S.-based, U.S.-focused economic mission of Donald Trump, minus the tariffs, obviously, that could play different roles, and we're not trying to go into another talk about the tariffs because we talk about it enough on this channel. But the point being that aligns with his part of the agenda. What is the other part? I think it was interesting when I heard a commenter, a proletariat commentator, and I say proletariat in the ironic sense, not in the actual sense, but a commentariat. How about that? Someone from the commentariat who was saying basically Donald Trump said it as a joke, and now he wants to follow through on it. It was brought up as an idea. He had mentioned it. He was kind of laughing at it, and then people started taking him a little seriously, and now he doesn't want to appear as though he's backing down. I think there's some truth to that, but I also think there is a very, very key part of this, which is he wants to appear as a strong leader, and he wants that to be a part of his legacy. What is one thing that everybody knows Thomas Jefferson for during his presidency? Not before his presidency, when he was helping author the Declaration of Independence, when he was helping in the Continental Congress as they're coming and deciding what the Constitution will look like, or as his time in the as Secretary of State during the time underneath Washington, or his time as a French ambassador. What was the main thing that you remember as him as a president? A Louisiana Purchase. There are many other things that he fought for. There are many other things that he got involved in, not trying to diminish it, especially with the Barbary Pirates, so on and so forth, but the Louisiana Purchase, the increasing of the U.S.'s land ownership by basically 1/3 or 2/3 at that point, that is something that goes down in history. It builds a legacy for you. Even if it was, as Jefferson quoted himself, against the executive authority that was originally outlined in the Constitution, it is what we remember about him. And imagine a new territory coming in underneath Donald Trump. And I understand the military aspect is actually, that would be the most damaging. Saying that we had a conqueror-in-chief who went out and was trying to expand America's borders by conquering again, I think that would be the most detrimental to his legacy, especially in the type of society we live in where war is greatly frowned upon. But imagine if he is able to get it peacefully. That will, if the Denmarkish people, the Dane people, the Greenlandic people decide willingly, which there is a small cohort of a party that is more open to working with the U.S. more closely, and not necessarily Denmark, though right now they had a recent election and the other four parties that have power there decided to make a coalition that is decidedly anti-U.S. But if he's able to get it peacefully, if they're able to convince that party that this is the right way, if they're able to convince the people that Greenland should be on the books as a U.S. territory, that is something that shows his strength, his ability to expand the United States, to bring in more resources, to expand the protection umbrella that we're capable of making. Imagine having military bases on Greenland that can actually provide platforms, and they can provide a platform for defense missiles, or like basically an Iron Dome early warning system that's based out of Greenland that could stop things coming in from Russia. That is obviously a hypothetical. I'm not trying to say there are actual plans for that, but my point being there are many more aspects to this than just the economic ones we've talked about before, and I didn't necessarily do a deep dive into it, but it was pointed out to me that this is also his ego at play, which is obvious. Donald Trump's ego is always at play, but it opened a new door of viewing this, which is the American exceptionalism, the perspective of America being the best, also can lend itself, when used or framed a particular way, to encourage expansion of the United States. We are the best. We have the best economy. We have the best culture, whatever perspective you may take, but believing that we are the best in different aspects and that we are deserving of sharing our culture and that other people will benefit from it is a natural flow of logic, is what I'm trying to get at. And that, while I'm not saying that it's good or bad inherently, that is a dangerous perspective. It is something that if you believe that we are the best and that we can expand and we should spread our culture, not just through influence, but through direct land acquisition and territory acquisition, you're going to put American lives at risk. And whether or not you think, like I said, good thing or bad thing, that is dangerous for the populace of the United States, especially our military age of men and women. So I think it's fascinating. This is another door into Trump's psyche, which is one thing that a lot of people don't necessarily understand. And I'm not trying to sit back and say I truly understand Donald Trump's psyche, but to pretend as though this is not something that weighs on him as a man of legacy who literally puts his name across buildings in multiple cities in order to have name recognition, I think would be to miss another important part of this story. He's not just doing it to be funny. He's not just doing it because he said he wanted to do it. He's doing it because he believes it will be genuinely beneficial to the people, and that benefit will write him down, will sketch or etch his name into the stone tablet of Americans' greatest leaders, or at least ones that had America's best interests at heart. So, with that said, let's actually jump into our daily delight. I want to hear your comments on everything I just said. Do you think I'm crazy? Do you think it is just seriously he's just trolling? What is it? Because I think if you come from this from the left, you're going to have a very different perspective. If you come from it from the right, in the middle, all these perspectives are going to be very different. And also, just like that one commentator that said something that I hadn't necessarily thought about before, at least in the context of this conversation, we knew he had an ego. I didn't necessarily apply it to this conversation. Commenting, putting it out there, could lend other perspectives to other people, not necessarily sway them to your side, but provide more insights. So let's share ideas, throw them down in the comment section. I love hearing what everybody has to say. So, with that, let's jump into our daily delight. This one is actually a very short one because it's a photo and a video that, well, let's just be real here. It is absolutely adorable, but also kind of goofy and weird. It's a bunny resting next to another bunny on top of a couch, and the headline reads, "Hey bun, what's the tea?" And it's basically the back bunny saying, whoa, what's up, bro? I'm snuggling on up. What's going on? You know how dogs sniff each other? It kind of is reminiscent of that. So if you want to see that cute photo video, or you want to read the other article from today from NPR, both the links will be in the description below that like and subscribe button. Also down there, you can find the podcast on Spotify, Pocket Cast, Podvine, as well as the Twitter handle at @YourDailyFlip, where I post the link to these videos, as well as our international news segment that comes out on Tuesday and Thursday. It's called 6 and 6, so 6 stories from around the world in 6 minutes or less. Both of the links to those come out on a daily basis over there, so you can come directly to the video on YouTube. So, with all that said, there's only one more thing to say. Stay safe, don't die.